everyone, it's Sharon with the CozyJunkStudio. I hope you're ready for a junky, grungy video. Now I pulled out some of my junk for this video, and these DIYs have been a lot of fun to make. We have done different types of techniques in this video that I think you're gonna enjoy, and if you like surprises, stay until the end because I have a surprise for you. I just want to take this time to thank everybody for hanging around and waiting on my videos. I know you guys have been because you comment and you let me know, and I appreciate it so much. I know videos have been a little sparse on this channel, but we are back and in full force to make sure that YouTube is on the forefront to get some videos out for you all. I just want to thank all of my subscribers. You guys really make a difference to this channel, and I want you to know that a lot of my friends on YouTube have said that YouTube has been unsubscribing people from channels. So double check and make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. Now hit that notification bell so you can see every time I release a new video. All right, let's get on into these DIYs. So this first project actually was 2 pieces of wood that came in a pile of stuff that I thrifted, or a bag of stuff that I thrifted, and I glued these back together and thought this would be the perfect base for this junk piece of art that we're going to make here. So grab some of your scrap wood. It doesn't matter what kind of the base is. We're going to go ahead and use some DIY weathered wood paint on this. It's going to be our base color to do the paint technique that we're going to start out with. Once we get this on here, I'm going to go ahead and let this dry, and then I'm going to seal it because the process we're doing, I need this base sealed so that I can keep this color and not sand back or go rub back all the way to the wood yet. Now y'all know I love to use that matte clear coat by RUSTOLEUM. It dries really quick, and once that dried, I'm going to use 2 coats of this tarnished pearl by DIY. And I'm gonna let this dry as well. And I'm just putting this on haphazardly, kind of in an oval shape around this, but not necessarily perfect because we want the weathered wood to show around the edges, and we want this to kind of blend into those edges. And you'll see once we get through to the sanding and the kind of blending what this is gonna end up looking like. Now I'll tell you the quickest way to get some crackle is using 2 layers, thick layers back to back of this clay paint, and use your heat tool or a drying tool, and this will crack beautifully, but not all over. So you can see here that I've dried this, and look at the gorgeous cracks in it, and that's what we wanted without having to use a crackle medium. You could possibly do this with chalk paint as well, but you have to make sure that you put 2 coats on really thick, not letting the first one completely dry, and using that drying tool to get the crackle. Now I wanted a random pattern on here, so I grabbed out this mandala and sort of a lace crochet look stencil, and I'm just taking some skeleton key from DIY, and I'm tapping this not completely all over the stencil shape, but just certain areas of it to give me that sort of aged look to begin with, and then we'll sand some of that back to make it even more aged coming up. I just love this color of skeleton key. It can really cast so many different colors, but it's casting a sort of a dark gray with a little bit of a blue tint to it on this, which is perfect contrast to the colors we're going to be using. Now once we finish this, I will let this dry. I think I actually use my drying tool, and I go ahead and seal this again. It's really important to seal your layers so you don't lose too much of your under layers when you get ready to do your sanding back and your distressing. So that's why we're sealing quite a few layers in between. Now if you want a lot of the wood showing back through, you don't need to seal your layers, or if you want a lot of the paint blending, you don't need to seal the layers. Now I want to add what looks like a little bit of a rusty brown color, so I'm going to mix some of these 2 DIY colors, the weathered wood and then the, I think it's fire starter. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's fire starter. And mix these 2 together to get the color I want. I'm not going to need much, so I'm just mixing them on this like non-stick paper. So I want to make the edge of this sort of grungy looking and maybe kind of dirty, just grunge it up. And so I'm just going to go all around the edge. I'm just using a brush and tapping this on all of the edges on top of both of those colors, so it helps to blend those as well. We will sand back through this and blend all the colors even more here in a little while, but once I get this on, I'm going to grab my water bottle and mist this and take my brush and just wipe it all over, wiping some of it back with a patting motion to make sure I leave plenty of that behind. So remember what I said about sealing your paint? Well, because I did spray this, I lost a lot of my paint around the edges, even though it did the job that I wanted it to get the middle of it colored. Now I'm gonna go back in and add some more of that mix back around the edges, just to add some of that back. And we're gonna take that weathered wood and we're going to pull some of that up from the base of our piece and add it to the top. That way it looks like some of that is coming through, but it's technically not, since we're using it to tap over the top of this color that we just added. Not only are we going to be adding some of that weathered wood back around the edges, I'm going to add just a couple, 2-3 spots randomly on here with those and dab some of that back, just so that that kind of doesn't just stay around the edges. Now we're going to be putting something on this, so some of this will get covered up. Now that everything is dry, we're going to go ahead and seal it to bring back those gorgeous dark colors, because the DIY paint dries lighter, and once you seal it, it brings its natural color back through. So I have these old Victorian, I'm pretty sure antique door plates that a knob, you know, and a key lock was in. And I thought that we would add that to this. I love these pieces and I've really been wanting to do something with them for a while. I purchased a lot of them together, of like maybe 8 with different shapes and different colors. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna add this to this gorgeous piece of wood that we've painted on. And now we're gonna add some junk to it. Now you could glue this on, but I've just added some screws onto mine. We're gonna add some gold rub and buff to kind of tarnish those a little bit, because the pieces we're going to add on top, the gold will blend in perfectly. I had bought a lot of these little gold filigree type pieces. They probably came off furniture, and I bought them for like $1 a piece and $10 a piece from a junk store, and I've just had them in my stash, and I thought these would be great accents on this door plate. So we're going to put one on the top and one on the bottom, and a circle one in the center. Add a knob. I'm going to use E6000 and just a touch of hot glue to secure it immediately, but that E6000 is going to hold this permanently. I go ahead and do a little bit of sanding around these edges to bring back some of that pearl colored, the tarnished pearl color through, and then I use a clear wax to seal that off after the sanding. And then this piece is done. I did paint the back of it in that weathered wood and add a sawtooth hanger, so someone could actually use this as a wall decor piece or a hook with the knob on there. Let me know what you all think about this one in the comments below. This next project started with when I was going through some of my old junk journal supplies. I used to put together little collages to go in journals, and I'm just showing you that I have a little box of them, and I dug through and found this little lady. But I thought I would show you a few of my junk journals and let you know that I love to make them. It's been a while. If you're interested in seeing some of these journals flip through, maybe at the end of videos, I will be happy to do that. Let me know in the comments below. These are just a few of the ones that I've made that are here. This one I'm getting ready to show you is more of like a bright whimsical with a dark undertone. I had a lot of fun making this one. Lots of techniques are in journals, so much fun. And then the next one is a sweater journal. I made it out of an old sweater, and it's got mushrooms in it. It's just gorgeous grays and grungy. And then the other one is like a ocean journal, and it is huge. I had so much fun making this one. This thing is really, really big. And then the other one below that is just a glue book. I love to do glue books. I haven't worked in them in a while, but again, if you'd like to see some flip throughs of these just at the end of our regular videos, let me know in the comments below. So I had found my photo or collage that I wanted to use, and I'm going to use just this little clipboard, and I'm using this scrapbook paper. It's like a wallpaper, a little bit of grunge already on it. This is one of Tim Holtz's wallpapers from his wallpaper line. If you don't know who Tim Holtz is, look him up. He's an awesome designer, definitely a grungy, junky, antique sort of style. So we're just going to use a glue stick and glue this straight on to the board. I took the little clip off. It was easy. It just had screws holding it on. Once I got the paper on, I just added those back really easy. We're gonna sand off those edges, so I'm not too worried about the little bit of overhang. I actually wanted a little bit of overhang so that I could sand the edges off. And then I'm gonna just grab my little collage and I'm gonna add some glue to the back of that and center it so that I can put something kind of right above it. So I'm just gonna add my glue to the back of this card, stick it on there, add this little faux clock kind of down in the corner, making sure that I have some long-lasting glue on there and a little bit of hot glue. And then we're gonna add this vintage file folder clip with some Gorilla Glue right on the top of that photo and add a piece, a little ornate bronze piece to the clipboard itself, or the clip itself, kind of giving it a little bit of a dressed up style. I'm gonna add a random number, just a 2, right above that little clock. And we're gonna go ahead and add this little pin nib, and I'm gonna sand those edges. Once I get those sanded the way that I want them, I am gonna go around them with a ink pad and kind of darken them up because they're white, which you can leave them white. That paper looking sanded makes it look kind of, you know, a little bit rustic, but I want mine to have a little bit of black around those edges. And then this will be a cool piece of artwork to hang on the wall. A lot of people say that paper crafting is not necessarily home decor, but I definitely think this is a home decor piece. You'll have to let me know what you think. Our next project is a newer style cutting board, but we're going to turn this into a piece with some antique junk on it. Now it's just a natural wood, so I want to use a vintage style pink and green. I've seen a lot of vintage pieces or antique pieces that have pink paint on them or green paint on them, and I thought that we would make one ourselves. So what I'm going to do is give a good coat, just a sloppy good coat of this pink, petticoat pink from DIY. Then instead of letting it dry, I'm just going to add my green in there, and I'm only adding it in certain places to make it look like messy, almost like it was painted 2 different colors. Some of it came off, some of it stayed. Then we're going to add a third color. We're going to add this white, and we're going to kind of do the same thing, but we're going to start swiping horizontal. We've been doing vertical the whole time, but now we're doing a little bit of horizontal. I also want to do just some random places with the colors, kind of patting them on, but for it to show up better, I'm going to dry it just a little bit and then go back in and pat that paint on to give it those smudges. And they will show up better with this base layer dry because we want it to look like they're just kind of smashed on there or smudged on there, like paint was just randomly placed. If you look at really old furniture that's got several layers, sometimes it has that, and it's just such a cool effect. So to get that, my paint needed to be dry so these other colors would not blend in too much with that base paint. Once this dries, we're going to go ahead and sand a little bit of these places to get some of that paint to come back through. We're going to sand the edges. Now the edges aren't completely covered, and that's fine. I am going to leave the back of this natural because it will match the edges. And then we're going to use some clear wax to seal this in, and then dark wax over this because we want it to look grungy. Once we get done with those 2 steps, we're going to do a 3rd step to make this look even older. I was digging through my paint and forgot that I had this color, I think it's called Pine Cone by Dixie Belle. Now this is a paint that I got off one of my friends that was clearancing out when she was going out of business. So I don't buy Dixie Belle, I just happen to have this one. I'm going to do similar to the method we've done before. I'm putting this on and spraying it a little bit because I want to tone this pink and green down and give it not necessarily a rust look, but just sort of a rusty, dingy look. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I thought this color really played well off of these 2 with the contrast. So we're just using that water to kind of blend these in and just kind of go around the corners and edges and a little bit in the center. We are going to be adding something to this, so some of this will get covered up. So I dug through my junk again and I found some of these gorgeous washer knobs, and this is not my idea. I saw these knobs used as flowers, so I wanted to recreate that on my own piece, which is this cutting board, and then I had this little flat jar. My dad had gave me a bunch of little vintage or antique bottles, so I'm going to use this, and I have this thick copper wire, so I'm just going to use it to wrap around these water gauges and feed into the bottle. I'm going to cut it off and again wrap it around each one of these, but before I do that, I'm going to add screws into the water gauges, not gauges, the water knobs. That way they're secured to the board and not going to fall off. I didn't want to use glue because I felt like the screws would work better. So I just took the wire and wrapped it up around the water knob and kind of wrapped it around itself. And I also wrapped it down a little far so it would look like it kind of had a stem on it. And then I twisted the wires around each other to make them go into the bottle as kind of one piece that was wrapped together, but you could still tell they were separately. Once I finished all three pieces, I cut some of the wire off the bottom to make sure they fit in the bottle. And then I took the hot glue, just a touch of hot glue and a little bit of, well, quite a bit of E6000, put it on the board itself, and then just held the bottle down there a little bit to make sure that it contacted good. And when I did that, I realized that I wanted to put something over the screws. So I just dug through my buttons and I found some really neat buttons that were more like, they don't have holes in them, so they just look more like decorative pieces. So I cut all the backs off of them and used some E6000 to get those put over the screws. Now I didn't add a bow, or I didn't add anything around the top of that jar, which I don't think a bow would be appropriate for this. But what do you think? Does the jar need something? I actually thought about doing a rub-on transfer on it, and then I just decided against it. Let me know what you think of this one. Our next project is going to be a jar or vase. Now, I was trying to find something that this stopper would fit, and the only thing it would fit is this green bottle. So we're going to take care of that and change the color. I put a coat of Slick Stick on here by Fusion and let it dry, and now I'm going to add this coat of the DIY White Swan paint. I'm going to add 2 coats of this using a sponge. I went ahead and added that white paint also to the stopper. We will change that later, and I did add the Slick Stick to the stopper as well. We're going to do some decoupage paper on this, and we're also going to make it look old and grungy. I think you're really going to like how this turns out. I end up loving this one. So I got some of my decoupage papers out, and I just cut out some pieces that I thought I wanted to go on this bottle, and I just kind of cut them down and cut some splits into them so they would fit better on a curved surface. And there is a lot of wrinkles that ends up in this, but you know what? It's okay because we want this jar to look old and vintage, and wrinkles is just going to add to that. Now with each one of these pieces, I just took some water and kind of went around the edges of them and tore the edges so they would look, again, even more vintage. I'm going to use Mod Podge to put on the bottle and then add my paper and put Mod Podge on top of it to attach it to the bottle. I also spray my papers before I put them on the bottle because it helps stretch them and they go on so much nicer. So I just mist them with a little bit of water, get them smoothed out, and add that Mod Podge on top. I go ahead and do this all around the bottle with different pieces that I have torn out to get the look that I want, using smaller pieces around the neck of the bottle to help get it covered as well. Once I get this finished, I let this dry and make sure that it's completely sealed, completely dry, and now I'm going to be using some of this faded burlap to kind of pounce all of the white areas where the paper is not covering or doesn't meet, and even on some of the areas that doesn't need it, just so that the paint is throughout the bottle in random areas to give it, again, more of that aged look, maybe like the paint is coming through the paper. Now I do go ahead and put a coat on the bottom, actually 2 coats on the bottom later on to finish my piece off. I absolutely love these black butterflies. I love the paper parts that I tore with the stamping and the postage. So I knew that we needed to bring out more of that black because I have something I'm going to add to it later So I decided to paint the stopper black, so I only had to give it one coat of the DIY little black dress, let that dry, and seal it with my matte clear coat. So I've had this other Dixie Belle product, which is a grunge glaze, and again, I wanted to try this. I've had it for a while. I think I've used it a couple times, but I thought maybe with the gray undertones in this, it might grunge this bottle up some without making it brown, and it did a little bit, but nothing too crazy. I'm assuming this would do much better like over white. You know, would I buy this at full price? No. I got this for $6 from my friend that was going out of business, and I picked up just a few things from her, but you can see it does kind of give it a little bit of a haze, and it even gives a nice little haze over the black, but I don't think it grunges it up really, really dark, which is fine. I think it gives it enough to do what I wanted. Now I just go ahead and take a paper towel and wipe back most of the excess off of that, leaving the rest of it down in those crevices. The last two steps I did not get on camera. I took some of this Finnabair wax in the color brushed iron around the bottle, around the stopper, and I added part of this piece of jewelry that I took apart and added the locket to this bottle. Let me know what you think about this one. This next project, we're going to be turning something new into something old looking or vintage style. So I'm taking this Dollar Tree metal tray and I'm adding 2 coats around the edge of the Tarnished Pearl DIY paint. I'm going to let that dry thoroughly before we move on to the next step. For our background on this piece, we're going to go ahead and use a glue stick and glue down this piece of cardstock or Tim Holtz wallpaper that has some old vintage text on it. I just went ahead and cut around it and then glued it down with that glue stick, just like we did the other piece. To go ahead and kick off and get this grungy, I'm going to add some dark wax by DIY all around the edge of this paint, blending it into that paper. We will do something else later on to help this paper blend into that paint as well. We're going to go ahead and rub that excess wax off. That way it won't be too dirty looking. We're going to be using a frame that I previously painted black for a project that I never did do. And I'm going to use one of Tim Holtz's cabinet cards, which is basically like a reproduction of an old photo. I'm going to use some glue to attach her to the back of this frame, and then I'm going to use some hot glue to attach the whole piece to this tray. But before we do that, I have chosen one of these paper collages that I had previously made. I'd showed you earlier when we were doing the other collage video, or the other collage project. So I'm going to glue that down really quick first, and it's so cute. It's got this cute little owl charm on it, and I made this using a coffee protector piece of cardboard. But anyways, so I'm going to lay that down, and I had to cut off a little bit of the bottom so that this would kind of lay flat on this. I do end up adding a little bit of a piece to the back of the frame to prop it up a little bit more with some hot glue. So I thought because the top left corner and side had something underneath of it that I wanted to add something kind of on the bottom corner. So I grabbed some of my old crocheted stuff that I use for parts and pieces. I try to use some that's stained and not sellable and that just is old and grungy looking because that's what I like. So I'm just using my scissors to kind of tuck that under the frame and some hot glue to put that underneath there. And then we're going to add, of course, some more stuff to this. We're adding some of that up at the top, kind of tucking it behind that frame where there's a little bit of a gap. Again, just to kind of tie it all in. I'm just kind of shoving it down there a little bit. And then I'm going to add part of this bracelet that we've used already on the bottle, but this project had came before. But this bracelet was very weird. I got it at a yard sale for like 50 cents and it just didn't seem like it would go together. I don't know. But I took this little piece off the end that had a couple things hanging down, and I attached it with some of my spray glue Crazy Glue Instant Hold to the corner of this frame. I just held it down with that glue, the Crazy Glue, and then I protected my photo and sprayed the activator, which instantly held it. And now I'm just adding a little bit more of that crochet to kind of cover up how it is just kind of laying on top of the frame. Add this vintage gold skeleton key with some more of that glue. I think I used Gorilla Glue and hot glue. And then I'm gonna add this eagle. I don't know if y'all remember, we took this off of an old jewelry box and it's really thin, but it's metal. But before we add it, I want to turn it gold to match the gold on the collage and on the key. So I'm just going to use my antique gold rub and buff to do that, to get it changed over. It'll still have a little silver coming through, which that's fine because there is some grays and silvers on this as well. Now because this is so thin, I'm just going to use hot glue to glue this down. And I didn't realize that I hadn't glued the key down. I thought I had, but I do end up gluing that down using that instant glue with the activator spray. And we put that down at the bottom. Once we finish that, then we're going to go ahead and add some of that rub and buff to go around the black frame and bring it out all those gorgeous details. We're also going to do it around the pan itself. You'll see there's some scratch marks on the pan already, but it's just because I dug in with my scissors. So I'm just going to use some of that gold rub and buff to cover that up. Remember, you can fix just about anything with a little bit of rub and buff or a little bit of paint. And then I'm going to kind of go around the edges and blend that paper in, getting that really blended around that edge, finishing this piece off as far as the looks. Now for a hanger, we are going to use one of the Dollar Tree black chains for this, and I think it totally brings this piece together. Now I do give the back of this a solid coat of white paint. Let me know what you think about this one. Do you think this is a neat decor? Like I said, a lot of people don't think paper crafting can be used as decor, but I definitely think it can. Now for our surprise at the end, we are going to be doing some drippy painting on this gorgeous vintage case that I paid $4 for. This was some type of United States stamped piece. So I don't know if it was, I think it was a United States government piece. It's got this beautiful tweed on the inside. We're not going to do anything to that. I love it other than vacuum it out and clean it. Now, as you can see, it definitely has some damage, but all that's going to get covered up with paint, so we're not going to worry about that too much. Now, the first thing we're going to do is give this a good coat of the color DIY Hey Sailor. It's a beautiful blue color, but this is definitely not going to be what it ends up, but I need this as my base. Now I'm just being sloppy putting this coat on because we're going to be doing some blending. This is definitely not a grungy, junky decor type piece, so that's why it was more of a surprise at the end instead of part of the actual junky grungy video. But it is going to look worn and vintage when we finish with it. Once I get a pretty decent coat on this top part and the front, I'm not going to worry too much about the sides or the back or the bottom with you all because the process will be the same. I just want to make sure you see kind of what I'm doing with this. Now I'm going to be using Fancy Farm Girl, Mermaid Tail, and Apothecary to start out with. Of course, we end up adding some other greens in there later. Now, right now, I have this kind of upside down, and I decide that I need to turn it right side up so that I can make sure the colors of paint are where they need to be. I start out with the Mermaid Tail, blending this in, adding some Apothecary and some of the Fancy Farm Girl. Once I get that coat on there, I realize I want to go ahead and add a little bit of texture to this. So I grab one of my Dollar Tree sponges and just kind of sponge over it a little bit. Then I add I use my heat gun to kind of dry it a little bit because we're getting a lot of paint on there right now and I need some of that to dry. I'm having to be very careful because I do end up taking some of my paint off. So I do stop and do my sealing before moving on to the next step, but we'll get to that here shortly. Right now, I'm just kind of texturizing these together so they're not just a bunch of brush strokes that are blended. Once I get this a little dry so that my paint doesn't pull back off with my sponge, I'm going to go ahead and start adding some of these colors. The Fancy Farm Girl and the Apothecary and the Mermaid Tail. I'm going for a drippy look on here, and I show you a little bit later on, I think. This is kind of based off of the photo that's actually on the paint inlay that we're going to be using. Yes, we're going to use a paint inlay, and this thing is going to turn out gorgeous. I can't wait for you all to see it. So, like I said, we're adding the Apothecary now, and we're going to add some Mermaid Tail, and I'm spraying with my water mister bottle to help those colors to kind of grab and blend, and where the paint is very thick, the water helps it do that even more. The goal is to keep the darker blue at the bottom, so I'm making sure that I keep referring back to my photo and to keep that bottom kind of darker. Even though my paint is blending down into it, I still need to try to stay true to my colors. But until you kind of get several layers of paint on or a good blend of colors, once you do that, then you can go back in and add the actual end colors that you need. I hope that makes sense. All right, so now you can see it's kind of starting to dry, and really this is where I should have put my clear coat on and sealed this up so that this next step didn't bring some of my paint off, and I do eventually do that, but like I said, you have to make sure that you're not just pulling your paint off after all that work. So I wanted to go ahead and add, I think this is some aviary to the very top of this, because I'm going to start doing the drippy technique. And I had a little bit of this darker green, which is a little darker than the Fancy Farm Girl. So I go ahead and I put my strip up here. I generally like to do that, and then add water, and the water will not thin it, so you have to take your brush and go back over it after you spray it to get it to thin up to start dripping. Once I started realizing that my paint was pulling back off at this point, I go ahead and stop, get this dry, and give it a seal coat with that matte Rust-Oleum clear coat. Let that dry, and then we start back over with the drippy technique. So we kind of start back over at this point, adding some more of that blue down at the bottom. I go to the top, I grab some Monet's Garden, which is a darker green, and I start blending that on my top with my Fancy Farm Girl to make sure that I still have the areas of color the way that I want them. And you know, we talk about how I kind of go back and forth on things on this channel, but I was going to have to do a layer anyways to get the drippy look. So I might as well start over and add those colors back in. Of course, this time I decided to add a darker green to help get those colors that I wanted. Spraying while I'm doing it to make the paint go on smoother. And once we kind of get it how the colors I want, then we'll start in putting some texture and getting the drips to come down. Now at this point, this is where I start using a paper towel. I've sprayed it a little bit. I've started getting it drippy. No, it's saran wrap, I'm sorry, to help give that texture so that the drippiness will have this texture to kind of roll down on top of. Wait till you see when I spray the water. Oh my gosh, it is just gorgeous the way that it starts transforming after I spray my mister bottle on here. So here it comes. Now, while this is dripping, I knew that I wanted to add some of the Fancy Farm Girl, so I grabbed some of that and I just start adding it to it. And you can see the water going down. Well, I'm not adding Fancy Farm Girl right now. Right now I'm adding more of that Monet's Garden and the blues. But now I'm adding the Fancy Farm Girl. See the dripping? It's pretty slow. I even have this sped up, but look how slow that dripping is. But in the process, I'm adding more paint while it's dripping. And that gives it even more texture and even more colors. Honestly, this is just a bunch of playing around to get this the way that I want it to look. I don't know how this is going to look. I just know that when I see the colors and I start spraying and I see the dripping, that automatically think, oh, I need to add this, oh, I need to add that, and I keep going until I get it the way that I want it. Now we are getting closer to the color that I really want, with the mixed in teals, blues, and some greens, with just a tad of that Apothecary showing through. When I first put that on, I was like, oh no, this looks like white, it's too much, but I knew those top layers would drip down over it, and then I would still have that effect. Now I thought about it, and I really wanted some of that blue at the top, but I didn't want it at the whole top, so I thought, you know, I'm just gonna grab some, put it in the corner, and start dripping it down. Oh, and this is Bohemian Blue. I decided that I needed to add more of a green blue, which Bohemian Blue is a little bit different, on top of the Hey Sailor. So that's why I thought that I would go ahead and just add it up there and let it start dripping down to give that different color. But I want to dry it some, because watch how it does when you dry it. You see how it stops the drips from going all the way down? And it's making these little spots, which I think are absolutely cool, and they end up staying in the paint. So your drying or dryer is definitely something that will help change the way your paint looks. It will also give you cool textures. So don't be scared to dry in between when you're doing drippy techniques or you're doing any kind of techniques, because you can just see it right now changing right before your eyes what that dryer does. So I'm absolutely loving the way that this looks, and I let this dry like this, and then I add a clear coat to it. Again, it's that same matte clear coat. I'm gonna let that completely dry before we move on to the next step. Now in the process, off camera, I go ahead and do the sides, the top, the back, the bottom, everything, and get that done. All right, now our piece is dry, and we're gonna use this paint inlay by IOD. It is called Chateau, and the colors in it are gorgeous, and they're going to look great on top of these colors. If you see down here in this corner, that was kind of my inspiration that I'm going off of. This is sort of how it's going to look. I'm going to cut this down to fit my case, and then we're going to put a thick, heavy coat of that clear coat of the RUSTOLEUM matte chalked finish. Now the thing with clear coat that you want to remember is you can use like Mod Podge, you can use other things to do a paint transfer. It needs to be a decent coat, pretty thick, but not overly thick. And also, I'm not going to let this dry all the way, because sometimes if you let it dry too long, it will seal your paint inlay in and you can't peel it off. So I'm going to pull this off while it's still sort of damp, and I'll show you on camera. But the first thing we're going to do is get this layer on, and then I'm going to lay half of my paint inlay down and then get my other one on there as well. The thing with the paint inlay is you want to make sure that you have your paint inlay down, the grid lines up, get it on there the way you want it. Don't move it around so the paint don't transfer. I go ahead and use my roller on it, my little Mod Podge roller, and try to get out as much of the wrinkles as possible. It still does wrinkle up, especially with this clear coat, which is fine. I did have quite a bit on there. I probably could have used less. I use my finger to make sure it gets down on there really well. Then you're gonna spray it with water, just mist it, and dab the excess water off from the paint inlay, and then you're supposed to let it dry. If you're using paint, you can let it dry all the way, but with a sealer, I found that you need to pull it up before it completely dries so that the sealer doesn't seal it in and not let you pull it off. Now my paint inlays have dried, and I'm going to go ahead and spray it again with the water and get it misted and then pull it off. You don't see me mist it. Apparently I didn't get that on camera. And now I am peeling it off before it's completely dry. You can see that the clear coat is still wet underneath there, but it is pulling off really easy and leaving a beautiful paint inlay behind. Now the thing about it is, this also, where I didn't leave it on completely, did not give a complete coverage, which worked in my favor because I wanted this to look worn, old, and like it'd been used, and it definitely did that for me. So if you want your paint inlay more distressed, pull it off before it completely dries and it will do the trick. Once I peeled this off, like I said, you could still see that there was a lot of sealer on there that wasn't dry. So I just took my fan brush and sort of smoothed all that out so the wrinkles would kind of blend in more, which, like I said, this thing is just gorgeous. I mean, this background, it just pulls in so together, and the distressed look, which the inlay itself was already distressed a lot heavily before you even do anything different to it. So I just got all that smoothed out, and then once this dried, I did completely reseal the whole thing because you want to seal your inlay so they don't get reactivated with water or anything like that. I also added some autumn gold rub and buff on the handles, on the latches, and all around. Let me know what you all think of this one. Hey everybody, I just wanted to pop in here at the end and see what you all thought about the DIYs. And if you would like more DIYs like this, I love grabbing all of my junk out and just kind of digging through it and coming up with projects. It is so much fun. If you want to help support this channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment in the comment section below. If you don't want to leave a comment, leave me an emoji. Just let me know that you did enjoy the content and you want to see more. Now, I'll see you all real soon in the next video.